Nasrin Sotoudeh is a prominent lawyer in Iran who's been fighting for children's rights, women's rights, and human rights.
She is one of the bravest voices in Iran.
She took on cases that other lawyers were too afraid to take on.
We've seen Nasrin Sotoudeh jailed for defending human rights.
It has cost her and her young family a lot.
Protesting against the law which forces Iranian women to wear the hijab.
The country's most prominent human rights activist and a voice for the voiceless.
I had been in Iran maybe a week, and I knew how to toe the line as a woman. And then I meet Nasrin Sotoudeh, who doesn't toe the line at all.
داستان یک عمریه که ما با این مسائل دست و پنجه داریم نرم میکنیم ولی اجازه نمیدیم که باز دست به خون دیگران آلوده کنیم.
On Wednesday, Nasrin Sotoudeh was again arrested. She had been tried and convicted in absentia. According to her husband, she intends to continue her activism from prison.
هیچ جامعه‌ای بدون پرداخت هزینه به هیچ جا نرسیده. همه احزاب، گروه‌ها، افراد آزادانه بتونن تو بحث‌ها مشارکت کنن. اینه که این پرونده برای من اهمیت داره.
Marcia, some producers produce films simply to create. You sought to produce a film to create change. With the understanding that needed action begins with awareness, you and Jeff produced a powerful documentary with a clear purpose. Please share what you set out to achieve with Nasrin and what has happened so far.
Well, thank you, and thank you for having us today. Now, when we first began to make the film, Jeff had made a previous film called Education Under Fire about the persecution of the Baha'i faith in Iran around 2011 and 2012, and he came across Nasrin at that time because she was a Muslim attorney defending Baha'i people, and he was very taken with that. And it was sort of an interesting way in which people outside, Muslim people were still helping their friends and neighbors, in spite of what could happen to them. And after we finished our last film about playwright Terrence McNally, we were thinking about what we wanted to do next. And we started to really do some research and homework on Nasrin and look at what she'd been doing over the past, decade since that film had been made. And she just became a really compelling figure for a film because of the kind of work that she does. Nasrin represents people from all walks of life in the LGBT community, in the environmental community, against the death penalty, women's rights, children's rights, in a very difficult society. And she's sort of a role model and for many women in the country. And but something else that's really important is that she also represents an incredible movement of women in Iran that people don't really know much about, that are fighting for their rights all of the time. We don't really know that in this country. We read what's going on politically, but we're not really aware of that. And so that was why we wanted to tell her story. And we were interested in creating a community portrait of activists, through Nasrin's personal story. As you know or not, while we were making the film in 2018, she started representing these young women. It was called the Girls of Revolution Street movement. And these were these women of all ages taking off their headscarves in public and waving them on sticks to protest the mandatory hijab law. And she began defending clients in this area, and she got arrested. So in the middle of making our film, she disappeared into prison. And in fact, this past week, it's the third year that she's been in prison with this unjust sentence. And then our film, and Jeff will talk more about this, but really took on a whole new energy because now our subject is in prison and it's such a horrible, dangerous, and of course, unjust situation. And our efforts and our energy as we began to launch the film also became, in addition to showing the culture of Iran, showing the women of Iran, telling Nasrin's story, it became very urgent to have the film become part of a global conversation about helping get her out of prison, bringing attention to her cause, and making sure that she's doing everything we can to get her released.
Well, your film does a beautiful job at creating the awareness on, again, so many different levels. You know, stories are such powerful agents for change, especially when shared with authenticity. And I have to say that the agency and artistry used in the direction of your film, they make Nasrin's story resonate on so many different levels through the lens of a wife and a mother, attorney, activist. It is her grace that serves as this common thread in all of these roles. So as the director, Jeff, what attributes about Nasrin did you want to convey with your footage? Were there particular parts of her character that you really wanted people to get and to see and to feel?
Yeah, I think at the beginning of every film, without sounding pretentious, there's sort of a vision of what you hope to get, and you don't know if you'll get there. The more preparation you do and forethought, the better chance that some surprises will come along the way that will bring you that and more. And so Marcia and I both love narrative films, and we both love how good narrative. I mean, I love, like, a lot of the films from the 1940s and 50s and 30s, you know, with all these character actors and John Ford and, you know, John Huston and stuff like that. And so we want to apply with veracity that sense of character and place to documentaries. Because, like, if you're talking about someone like Nasrin, or, like, as Marcia mentioned before, Terrence McNally, you don't want just this marble figure who people sort of look at from afar. You want to make that personal connection. And whether it's Terrence, you know, as a young LGBT writer trying to find his way in the world and being true to himself, or Nasrin stepping outside of herself to defend so many others, it's there's a spark of inspiration we can pass on if you can connect to them personally. And so, you know, our goal was to tell Nasrin's story, both, as you said, as a woman, as a mother, as an activist. And I think also, just the more you realize how much she loves those around her and how she's loved by those around her, the more you feel that sacrifice that she makes when she realizes she might have to go back to prison. And the horror of what she's experiencing each day now, because you've seen her as a mom and as a wife. And I guess I'll just say one more thing, which is that sometimes I've interviewed a lot of people. I used to have a radio show, and sometimes people who do impressive things in public are less impressive in person. And the wonderful thing about Nasrin and her husband Reza is that they are the funniest, kindest, smartest, just good people in person as they are in public. And it makes it all the more motivating to get Nasrin free.
That's awesome. Yeah. And you just feel so connected to her. I mean, I wanted to throw my arms around her, you know, a particular point where you see her cry a bit. I just wanted to embrace her and hold her. And so, yeah, it's just an incredible story that both of you have worked to capture so beautifully. Lots of tears from me went into watching this film.
And a few laughs along the way. I always love that, you know, we had some, like I said, some funny discoveries, and one of them was that she participated in the ALS water bucket challenge, you know, and all of a sudden we found this footage of her saying, and I'm dedicate my challenge to Desmond Tutu, and I hope he follows us in South Africa. And then all of a sudden, you know, these hands reach over and dump a bunch of water over her head. She just breaks out of this hilarious laugh. And, you know, so there's a spectrum in Nasrin, the whole thing.
Yeah, the whole sort of human spectrum that was just captured so incredibly well. You know, producing any film comes with risks, but with this documentary secretly filmed in Iran, the risks were great. That said, with great risks can come great rewards. So what have you found to be the most rewarding with regard to the production of this film?
Well, you bring up and, making it, I mean, obviously we couldn't go there. It would be too dangerous. Jeff had been there, and so that was out of the question. He'd made other films about Iran. And then again, if we'd actually gone there and we'd been on the street with an American crew, forget it. It would have been over. So actually, it lent itself really well to, having these people intimately follow her around, because we were able to capture so much more of her life in different ways and really get in there close in ways that we hadn't really, wouldn't have been able to get any other way. I think for me, it's a lot of things actually. One thing, of course, is our relationship with Reza and Nasrin as people. I mean, Jeff and I, as a married couple, and even though they're 7,500 miles away from us, we've really developed this incredibly close, personal relationship with them that's really transcended making the film. That's really grown quite a bit, actually, since we finished the film. And that's been really, incredibly important to us personally. I think the other thing is that Nasrin is a person of extraordinary purpose. And I think as a mother myself, one of the questions I really had to answer is, how do you do that? I mean, how do you make these choices? And, people often ask, well, after she got the Sakharov Prize and she got out of prison the first time, because she had been defending she'd been arrested for other legal work previously. She could have left, but she did not leave. She stayed in the country because she loves her country and she's trying to affect change from inside and make it a better place for her children. But, I said, well, how is this person can make the sacrifice? And what I learned is that that's not how she sees it, nor do the other women that she has worked with that have been in prison or would have been in prison but escaped from Iran. They truly believe that the work they're doing can and will and does make a difference. And their purpose is her purpose is extraordinary. And it's so inspiring to work with someone like that, who knows exactly what she wants to accomplish and is willing to put that before all other things. That was incredible to me.
Yeah.
I think when he first had the mission for this film, it was obviously to tell Nasrin's story in a personal and immersive way, but we had a couple other pieces that we hope we could come across through that. And one of them was, as Marcia said, I've done a number of films about Iran in the past, and over each film I've had more and more appreciation for the people and culture of Iran. And I think that's something that's just not seen in the West. There's so much demonization of Islam, demonization of Iran. We've even had national security advisors in the last administration who were just eager to bomb Iran as soon as possible. It's terrifying. And so we really wanted to be able to personalize Iranian culture and people, and also through Nasrin, show a community of activists, that Nasrin's not alone. There's so many people who may be less famous but have been in the trenches doing just life-changing, empowering work. And thank goodness we were able to do that. And that's in large part because of Nasrin, but also we had these remarkable film crews that we were working with in Iran who had to stay anonymous for their own safety. But just that process of walking down the street, holding a camera next to Nasrin Sotoudeh could have sent them into prison for years. So that's a highly dedicated crew to work with, and it's highly motivating to do as much as you can with a story. And so, we were just thrilled that Nasrin, who loves the arts, took us along with the camera people into an art gallery that looks like you're in Greenwich Village, into this funky movie theater. To see Errol Dorfman's Death of the Maiden, to a bookstore, all these different places that you don't expect to go. But I think it's also all sewn together through Nasrin. She has this wonderful line in the film that she says right after she got out of prison the first time in 2013, she was with this famous poet, and she addressed this literary group, and she said, I've always envied the arts, because the arts can do something that no other action can. The arts are the best way to take on tyranny. The arts are the best way to overturn tyrants, something like that. And I love that, and it shows the power of what you're doing too, which is finding a way to tell stories to break through.
Yeah. Well, and to that point, I love when her daughter I love hearing her daughter's voice. I love that you had so many different voices to help to share the story, and with their daughter getting into the arts and pursuing that. It was just refreshing to see a whole person. Oftentimes when stories are told, especially in the mainstream media, you get this one siloed sort of perspective, but to be able to see the story through different lenses and through different parts of just everyday life, it makes it all the more real and accessible and relatable. And I could see myself in her shoes, doing some of the things that she was doing. And it was just really profound. Just the small everyday things that made such a big impact. So.
Thank you. Can I just add one little thing to that, which is that
Please.
There's political forces in this country that want to have these walls up. So that, because I think that our culture is just perfect the way it is, and the same thing in Iran, where there's fear and political purposes want to have cultural and language and political walls up, but society moves forward when we break through those walls and we connect with each other and learn from each other. And I think Nasrin is such an amazing role model for people all over the world. It's not just an Iran story, and I think the more we can find ways to make those connections and break out of our silos, as you say, the more we can move forward.
Absolutely agree. And again, to your point, speaking about wanting to really show that culture in a light that perhaps some of us have not seen before, that was incredible. And then when you back it up with Ann Curry saying, hey, the most loving, open embrace from a culture that I've seen, it really gives you pause to just stop and to rethink, like, why do I think this? Why do I have this belief about these people? And because a lot of it, we don't even realize we have a particular opinion. It's just sort of ingrained in us. And it's films like yours that wake people up that have been sleeping all too long. So.
Well, I just want to add to what you're saying, because was a big point of conversation with Jeff and me, because, many people here don't know anything about Iran in this country. And there are a lot of Iranians who actually live here as well. There's a massive Iranian diaspora, and we're very privileged to meet a lot of those people. But most Americans do not know anything about Iran. If they do read the newspaper, if they do read the news, and they get even a perspective, you read what goes on between governments. You don't really read what goes on in the country with the people. We don't see the people. We just know, nuclear accord talks or hostage crisis or, or this or that. And it was really important for us to sort of, kind of bring you into what we like to call our common humanity and show the culture and the people, that we never get to see, and to recognize that, we're all alike in so many ways. I always say that one of my favorite moments in the film is when Nasrin is picking up Nima from school with his backpack, and they're walking home, and they're hand in hand, and that's such a universal image. And the other thing too we really wanted to get across is what an incredibly beautiful country it is. Again, from the mountains and the sea and the bazaar and all of these things that are there that so many people just aren't aware of. And I think for both of us it's been very gratifying, not just to hear from people that, I didn't know about Iran this way, but to hear from Iranians who can never go back to the country, how much it meant to them to see their country this way. They've left, they still have family there, or their children have never been there, and they can't really go back because they would end up in prison perhaps. And so we were able to sort of bring that also, and that was something we talked a lot about trying to accomplish, making sure we saw Iran as the beautiful place it is for so many people who live there and have had to leave.
Well, yeah, it's certainly it's such a gift, this new perspective that is shared in the film, and it's also in the little details. For one reason or another, I recall a shot where it's you're there on the street in the city, and you're at like an intersection by a crosswalk, and there's a little boy who's having a purple popsicle or something. It's like all over his face. It's like, oh, my son had a purple popsicle the other day. I remember what that looks like. And there's just those small little nuances that instantly make you feel connected to another culture, to another situation. So again, so beautifully done on so many different levels. You know, so something here, thank you for preserving the language, opting to incorporate subtitles for the majority of the film. In your opinion, so as filmmakers, how much does the preservation of dialect affect the integrity of a story, of a film?
Well, that's an interesting and tricky question. And, you know, we've been interviewed many times, and you're the first person to ask that question. So you get bonus points. It's part of respecting the people whose story you're telling. I mean, we're not Iranian. And so we really took seriously being as true to the voices that we heard as possible. And that's the voices of what they're saying, but also even the way they're saying it. It is interesting, though, because Farsi is constructed much differently than English. And so sometimes, you know, whole chunks can be at the beginning of a sentence, but also oftentimes meaning comes through nuance and interpretation and not a direct word. And there's even not gender-specific pieces in the language. And so, you know, we obviously need to be tight and accurate with our subtitles, whatever country they are, but we also need to make sure that we're editing properly in Farsi so that if someone is from that language, they're not going to go, what the heck is going on? And it's very tricky because, like, when you're editing something, sometimes, you know, you need to just trim a little bit of the S or put the two words together, or there's a long gap, and you can mess up a lot. So we had some fabulous people, translators, sound people, who were there for us in the trenches every single second, and a fabulous editor too, who really sweats the details. And all that's part of the behind the scenes process of making it work.
Right. Yeah, well, I just I thought it was beautiful. I mean, there's something about just that authentic original voice, and there are those who don't care for subtitles, like, oh, just dub over it so I can just, you know, but it's worth reading. It's worth the preservation of all of those details. So thank you for that.
And just like it's worth getting to know our history and Iran's history, it's worth getting to know the incredible legacy of poetry in Iran, you know, which is just mind-blowing. And so, yeah, just take those little steps and they'll lead you to someplace wonderful.
Well, you know, at another spot in your film that when we're in her office and you zoom in on different pieces that she has framed. And I mean, I wouldn't be able to read or understand what that is. That wouldn't mean anything to me. But for you to translate that as well, not just the spoken word, but the written word, because it is a beautiful language, and to be able to see it and hear it and have that translated in both cases I thought was really, really fantastic. Thank you again. Thank you so much.
Thank
you. You know, so you've just produced this documentary featuring the Nelson Mandela of Iran, right? I can only imagine how that has changed you. So I want to just ask both of you. Marcia, let's start with you. How have you grown from this experience, both professionally and personally? What has this film done for you?
Well, it's certainly, I think getting to know people this way in another culture, in another place that I knew nothing about, certainly has been quite transformational for me. I mean, really life-changing, particularly because of the kind of work that she does and the risk that she takes. I mean, I mean, there's a couple of things. I mean, making the film too, we were in the midst of the last presidential administration, and I was very anxious a lot during that period about what potentially was going to happen to our rights in this country, our civil rights, our human rights here in this country. It was a great fear of mine. And I you know, making the film is, you know, you can feel that in Iran, you know, all the time. You see there what happens in a country where people's rights slip away, where people's rights are taken from them. This is what it's like. We have a lot to be grateful for here. You know, compared to so many other places in the world, we have so much freedom and we do have so many rights. But the truth is that, you know, they could go like that if people are not paying attention. or don't care or don't take responsibility for it. So I think that was very inspiring and just a constant reminder of sort of my own civic obligation to make sure that I do everything I can in my own country, as we go forward, to make sure that we don't slip away from democracy, that we don't lose our civil rights, that we don't just give them up because we just think, well, we have them, so don't pay attention to them. That was very important. And I just think, realizing how important it is to have a life of purpose for me is it's something I think Jeff and I talk about, all the time, about purpose, having purpose. When you make a film like this, it's not easy, obviously. No documentaries are easy. No films are easy. Nobody makes a film and says it was an easy experience ever. But you have great purpose while you're making it, and it's continued to give us, I think, both a lot of purpose about moving forward, about on her behalf and other issues that we care about.
Yeah, I mean, as always, that's why we work together. We're married. I agree with Marcia.
Thanks,
but it also, you're welcome. It also connects with what you were saying about the mission of AwareNow, which is connecting to others and finding ways to serve others, and not thinking of just my piece, but how all the pieces fit together. And I think Nasrin teaches us that in many ways. When we first talked to Nasrin about doing this film, she right away, this is so typical of Nasrin. She said, well, I wouldn't want it just to be about myself. And we always thought of it would be a conduit to others, but she wanted it to connect to others. And, she was very inspired by Mahatma Gandhi. You talk about those signs in her office, half of them are quotes from Mahatma Gandhi, and Nelson Mandela, people outside of Iran who did remarkable work, who saw beyond their own narrow silo to realize that society is made up of a lot of different forces, and inspired her. And we feel that she could be that inspiration for others. I have to say that it's important to realize that right now, Nasrin is in one of the worst prisons in the world. So, as we love Nasrin and we think of her humanity, we also need to think of her like many other political prisoners around the world, who are in just horrendous conditions. She's in a cell that's about 10 feet by 13 feet long and wide. There's about 12 beds in that room stacked up. There's a low ceiling. There is no windows. There's no ventilation. There's a constant smell of sewage. They have water that has too much salt in it, so it makes everyone sick. And the food has no protein in it. She had COVID. She has a heart condition. And this is what they're doing to Nasrin only because she was advocating for a better society. She, as Marcia said many times, she could have left Iran if she wanted to. She's staying in Iran because she loves her country, and this is the punishment she's getting. So the more people can get involved on behalf of her, it's really getting involved on behalf of others like her as well. I'll be overt and I'll say you can go to our website, www.nasrinfilm.com, and there's so many ways to get involved on behalf of Nasrin and to be aware now of others like her.
Well, and I'm so glad that you bring this up, because when we understand it begins with awareness, but we need to convert awareness to action. So it's like step one, become aware. Step two, do something. What will you do with this awareness? And so when we look at the conversion of awareness to action, I'm so glad you brought that up, so we can go to your website. Oftentimes when people become aware, that's wow. So they're at this state and at this moment, and they're ready to do something, and they say, I don't know what to do, but I'm aware that I should do something. So to be able to have those tools to say, okay, now step A, B, C.
And on the website, just so you know, there's links to all these wonderful partners we work with, like the Robert F. Kennedy Human Rights Center, Amnesty International, PEN America, and others. So boom, you can go and support those great groups. There's a petition for Nasrin and other good stuff. So it's not just about the film, it's about supporting the cause.
Well, and I will say that your film, there are films that make people feel good or make people charge up they want to do something, but then there's your film who makes people want to do something to a particular degree. I know as soon as I got done, watching the film, when I laughed, when I cried, I'm like, I have to do something right this moment. So I got online, I found the Amnesty, so I just signed the petition, and but was so hunger. Like, if she is here in the cell, away from her kids, away from her husband, I'm not away from my kids, I'm not away from my husband, but, you know, would I have the strength to do what she's doing? It makes you really question, what would I be strong enough to do? And to not want her suffering to be for naught. Like, how do I help her? How can I suffer with her, in essence, you know?
Can I tell you something just about that? When you talk about awareness and action, which I'm a big believer in, you know, awareness is great, but without action, nothing ever happens. And that's it, like both, you know, internally and externally, you know, in life. But one thing we know, and I really want people to know this in terms of taking action, it does really make a difference. I mean, a lot of times people feel, well, I signed a petition, you know, but so what, you know, but that is not the case. I mean, we have learned many things through this process, through our impact campaign, that it does make a difference. It really does make a difference. I mean, you know, in a big way, it has become sort of a little bit of a blanket of safety for her. You know, it's very difficult for the government to really move against her in some of the harsher ways they've done with a lot of other people, because she's so well known and people are talking so much about her. It's a protection for her. It really, really does make that difference in her life. But in a very personal way, it makes a difference. One of the greatest things that happens when you're a political prisoner, I mean, maybe all prisoners, but certainly for political prisoners, people feel they're forgotten. No one remembers them. They're just in that prison forever, and, you know, nobody cares anymore. And so all the activity that goes on continues to give Nasrin hope. I mean, she, one of the things she said to us, you know, is that she, you know, Reza follows, you know, through social media, everything that's going on with the film. And he shares with her on their phone calls or their visits, you know, oh, this happened or that happened, or, you know, they had this event, they did that. And, you know, she told us, you know, when she goes to sleep at night and she closes her eyes, you know, she imagines what these things would be like, you know, being part of it, really. And that gives her hope to go on in a horrible situations. It really keeps her going. So no one should ever feel like, oh yeah, I signed a petition or I wrote a letter, and not, because guess what? It really, really does make a difference.
Right. Well, and that is very good to know. And again, referring to your film, how she shows how she's so touched, so honored, her and her husband, the cards that were sent by people all over the world, and these beautiful, how she's holding so tightly that of the peace sign that was, you know, colored for her. And so thank you for sharing that, because we do need to know that, you know, while we might not see the impact that we make it. All energy has to go somewhere, right? So I just can't thank the two of you enough for doing not only what you do, but how you do it, because these truly are the stories that need to be seen and heard to create change in a very organic, authentic way. And thank you so much for helping all of us become a bit more aware now.
Well, vice versa.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you for the work. Really, thank you for the work you're doing, because it does all start with awareness. We don't know so much. People don't really know a lot about what's going on in the world, and it's difficult. You know, we don't. People, you know, also have a view of this country. I mean, if you watched what happened here January 6th, you would wonder one thing, and that's a very tiny group of people that showed up there. It's not really this country. You know, it's not. And we have to know that, you know, that what we see in the news isn't that country either. And it's important to learn that. I believe this, you know, and I do. I think what, you know, if you can really connect with people as people, you understand we're all alike. You know, we all, as our great Terrence McNally said, we all want for the same things. We all have the same hopes and dreams, you know, and that really unites us as people all around the world.
And where we're not alike, it's interesting, you know, and that's not bad either. So either way, if you can come to those two places with respect and openness, you'll be better for it, and collectively we all will. So again,
no, I very much agree. And again, thank you so much. Excited to share your film with the world and get people becoming more aware.
Thanks. And it started on Hulu actually this week. So, I do want to just one last thing. Jeff mentioned the website Nasrin Film. The film is now on Hulu. Obviously, everyone doesn't have Hulu, but if you go to the website, the film is really available around the world. There's a lot of ways to watch it here, obviously through Amazon and iTunes in Canada, and it's playing in like 52 countries around the world. It's been licensed for broadcast. It's on streaming in all kinds of places. So the website shows people exactly how to see the film and also how to get involved.
Awesome. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you. Thank you.